Okay, on the Strong Women podcast today, Erin and I are sitting down and answering some of the questions that you guys have submitted. And don't we have great listeners, Erin?
Yes, it's been actually so fun to interact with people on Facebook, to find this community of women who are excited to learn and grow and read, and so it's been so fun. And to get questions in has been good. It's been good for us to think through them, and so anyways, it's been fun.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, first question, Erin, is are our husbands in ministry? So you go first on that one.
So our husbands in ministry, that's a good question. Well, yes, we are. When we first got married, actually, my husband was a youth pastor at our church, and we did youth ministry in California for a little while. Then we moved to Colorado and did youth ministry out there. And
I wish you were still here.
I know. We used to be in Colorado, but then we moved back to California for my husband to attend Talbot, which is the graduate school at Biola University. He was wanting to get his master's in philosophy. So we moved back to California. And when we moved back, my husband started to work for an organization called Stand to Reason. And because of all of our youth ministry time and just his passion for equipping young people in the church to know what they believe, why they believe it, and why it matters, he came on at Stand to Reason, which is an apologetics organization, and started teaching not just in our own local church, but all around the country on the topics of apologetics. So, and then 3 years ago, we left Stand to Reason and with their blessing and their friendship, and we started a ministry called Maven. And Maven is youth focused, and about 50% of what we do is geared to young people, and about 50% of what we do is geared towards the people who disciple young people, which is parents, grandparents, pastors, youth leaders. So we've been in this Christian nonprofit ministry type of world now for about 17 years, I guess. So yes, in ministry, we're still involved locally in our church, of course, and serve there. But long answer, I guess, to we're in ministry. What about you guys, Sarah?
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to say, if for our listeners, we've talked about Maven. That's the ministry that Erin and her husband Brett run, and it's fantastic. And they have a parent podcast. It's called The Maven, Maven, Maven Parent Podcast. And I've just been catching up on it, but they did one recently that I'm actually 18 minutes away from finishing. So, and it's what does it mean to be male and female? And it's so fun. They have a really fun dynamic, Erin and Brett do. And so it's fun to listen to them. And then they also have a lot of wisdom, so it's helpful to listen to them. And then they also have another one that I can't wait to listen to called The Practical Steps to Help Your Kids Navigate the Gender Chaos. And I'm just excited about that because we just need that to think about that as parents. But anyway, love what Erin and her husband do. They're just wonderful, and their whole family. But anyway, okay. So us, so John and I met at Summit Ministries. Some of you will be familiar with Summit. This is actually a Summit hat, and I didn't do that intentionally, but we just love Summit for so many reasons. Mostly because we met there, and that's amazing. If you don't know about Summit, you can visit their website, summit.org, to find out more. And really the short of it is that they, about 50-something years ago, a guy named Dr. David Noble started it because the statistics were saying that 50% of kids going into college claiming to be Christian were leaving college saying, not anymore. And he said, we gotta train our kids to know why they believe what they believe. So this was like 50-something years ago, and Summit is still going strong, still training kids to know why they believe what they believe. And so it was Summit was very formative for me, not only in who I married, but in how I started to understand worldview and the fact that Christianity dealt with everything. We got married, and John was still working with Summit, and that brought us from Tennessee, in a little town called Dayton, Tennessee. So some of you listeners are probably like, oh, that's where the Scopes Monkey Trial was. Yes, it was. And oh, that's where Bryan College is. Yes, and then you have nothing else, because there's nothing else in Dayton, Tennessee except wonderful people. And so anyway, we were there for our first 5 years of marriage, then came out to Colorado to work more closely with Summit. And then several years into being in Colorado, John started working with Chuck Colson. And so now John runs the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, which is who hosts this podcast and produces this podcast. So we love the Colson Center, and we adored Chuck Colson and his wife Patty, who were just treasures for the Christian community, and we miss them a lot. But anyway, so yes.
Yeah, and okay, so I want to give a little plug for your husband and what he does too. But if our listeners, if any of you don't subscribe to Breakpoint, which is Colson Center's daily commentary, and your husband John does that, I just think it's so valuable. And John does a 4 to 7 minute commentary every day, Monday through Friday, on some cultural issue that is going on, and brings a Christian worldview to it. And I tell parents all the time, like, this is something you need to listen to. You need to give 6 minutes of your day to every day to help keep just a pulse on what is going on around us. And we can't put blinders on. We need to have, at least kind of a basic knowing of what's going on. So I've listened to Breakpoint for I don't even know how many years. I mean, I was listening to it when Chuck Colson was doing it so long ago, but I love that John has picked up that baton, and he does such a great job, and I love it. So if you don't subscribe to that already, it's such an important part of what Colson Center does, bringing a Christian worldview to all these areas of life. So that's my plug for your husband and my.
We're so sweet to each other. We are for each other.
We didn't even pay each other to do that.
I know. We did not even plan that. That was great.
Okay. Next question, Sarah. Okay. What are your alma maters? So mine, actually, I'll answer first, because this one, I might have come in before our episode with Monique Duson, but in that episode, Monique talked about going to Biola and studying social science, which is exactly what I did. I went to Biola University many years ago.
You're so young.
I'm not a spring chicken. And so many years ago, I went to Biola. I graduated with a degree in social science, and I emphasized in political science. So that is my alma mater and what I studied. So Sarah, what about you?
Okay, well, I kind of wanted to cross this question off and not answer it, because this is an insecurity of mine. And so here you go, listeners. I'm just going to lay it out there. You can think what you want of me, but I did not graduate from college. And my story, I'll tell you a little bit of my story. I went to Blue Mountain College in Mississippi through the fall semester of my junior year. And then I transferred to Bryan College in Dayton, Tennessee, and I did 1 semester there. And you might be wondering, why would you transfer? Well, I'll tell you, I married John, and my husband, in that, obviously, if I married him, in the middle of my junior year. So anyway, when I transferred from Blue Mountain College there's a couple things that happened. Okay, so I was studying elementary education, because I thought, I'll be a teacher. That's what I should be. But, I just didn't know what I wanted to do at that point in life. And I just thought being a teacher was what you should do if you want to have a family someday. I don't know why I thought that. And so I was going that route. And then a couple things happened. One is I did my observation semester at a public school close by, elementary school, and I'm like, no, this is not for me. I observed this lovely teacher who I just thought was amazing. And I thought, there is no way that I could do this. And so I have huge respect for teachers. What's funny is I am a teacher in a way, but not in that kind of sense. But anyway, so I started questioning, like, do I really want to do that? Not really. Then got married and transferred. And, you know, that was my junior year. I really only had a year and a half left. But not all my credits.
I didn't realize that we had this in common, but I got married before my junior year of college too. I still had 2 years left.
Okay.
When you got married too. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just made that. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
We both had that. Okay, so
Right.
you
So
got married and then transferred.
Yes,
Was
so I
that
got married.
disorienting?
It was super disorienting. I loved Brian. I loved the classes and the professors I had. And but it did feel disorienting, and not all my credits transferred.
Oh yeah.
And I just remember thinking, what can I finish in a year? What can I finish in a year? I don't want to go to school a whole nother, you know, instead of a year and a half, I was looking at 2.5 more years. And I'm like, I don't want that. So I'm like trying to think of what is the, you know, the bare minimum I can do, when it really struck me one day, like, wait, why am I doing this? You know, that's not how education should happen, where you're just like, what's the bare minimum I can do to get a piece of paper in my hand? And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so John and I were talking, and I was like, I'm a verbal processor, so I'm just processing it out. And he's like, whatever you want to do is fine. If you want to stick with it for 2.5 more years, that's great. If you want to stop, that's great too. Like, it's not like you're going to stop learning. And I thought that was such a light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, right, because I'm a learner. Like, I can continue learning. I'm gonna be a lifelong learner. And so I did. I stopped, and I did not go back. But I'll tell you that I've learned more since leaving college. Not that I'm not saying that college wasn't great. It was more my attitude towards learning developed and changed.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've just learned more since then. And I think one thing that has been a huge part of my education, which I mentioned on a recent podcast, is right after I had Abigail, I decided I'm only going to read books that dive me deeper into life, and not that distract me or make me want to escape. And so I just started working my way through the classics, and starting with Uncle Tom, and which is, you know, great place to start. And then I went to Scarlet Letter, because I did read that one in high school, and I understood it. Most of the books in high school that they threw at us, I was like, what? Because I had not read the classics before. And so I went there, and then I went to Tale of Two Cities, and this is another embarrassing moment, but here you go. I thought, well, Charles Dickens, I should read Charles Dickens, right? So I pick up Tale of Two Cities early on in my classics journey, and I remember reading the first chapter, and I was like, I have no idea what's happening. Are they at a funeral, or is this like I really had no idea. I knew there was a cart involved somewhere, but I said, you know what, I'm gonna put this aside. I'm gonna go for an easier one for now. And then what's so encouraging though is about 3 years ago, I picked that back up, and I love that book. And I just got to the end of it, and I felt so accomplished, because I was like, look how much my mind has grown in just whatever it was, 10, 12 years. Like, I could not have tracked with this story when I first started out on this classics journey. And now it's my favorite book. So it was a huge thing for me. But anyway, there you go,
Well,
folks.
I think I'm thankful you shared that, Sarah, because I'm sure as you're talking, there are listeners who relate to your story, or and if nothing else, I think there's so many of us that relate to your story, even those of us that finished our degree and got that certificate, and because I learned more actually when I got out of the system of education and had freedom on what to learn. I've learned more, I know, since then as well. And of course, there are careers and that people have to have that certificate for. So, by saying that education isn't just about college, which is what I would say, doesn't demean going to
Right.
college and having those certificates. But I think when we bring a Christian worldview to education, that's what allows us to say things like what John said to you. Well, you have freedom to choose what you want to do, because education isn't just about sitting in a classroom
Right.
and completing papers. It might include that, but that's certainly not what it is. And it's a Christian view is that it's about the person. It's about cultivating virtue and character. So it's much more than a college degree. And so you shouldn't feel shame, even though, we live in a culture where, yeah, like I said, I mean, it's not that the certificate doesn't matter, but the certificate doesn't say everything about a person that sometimes we think it says.
Right.
And I know in my own life that some of the wisest, most read people that I respect don't have a college degree. And they're some of the most wonderful people that I love to spend my time with. And so, that is that question of what does it mean to be educated from a Christian worldview? And
Right. And from a Christian worldview, I finished through my junior, I finished through my junior year.
yeah.
So I'm missing that senior year. But from a Christian worldview, no learning is wasted. And I learned so much. Like I think that my love for history started at Blue Mountain College because I had to take Mississippi history, and I thought this is going to be the most lame class. And I remember exactly where I was sitting because the history teachers in high school were not stellar. Sorry if you're listening, any of my history teachers, but I remember one in particular would literally just get up and read the textbook. So it never dawned on me that this was interesting. And so when I had to take a Mississippi history class, I remember sitting in this old one of those wooden desks that has the little flap in front of you kind of thing. and I thought, oh boy, well, at least my friends are in here. And the professor comes in, sits on his desk, and it's just spilling over with notes. And he doesn't look at one of his notes. He just starts telling the story of Mississippi. And I was mesmerized. I was like, what? This, like, oh, duh. History is just one giant long story. And it changed. I mean, it was beautiful. And so I've loved history since,
Yeah. There is the long answer to what our alma maters are, and even with a bonus of what we think of education. So there you go. Okay, so our next question is actually a two-parter, Sarah. So we'll try to, I think the first part we can answer pretty quickly. So the first part is, first, during your conversation with Monique Dusan, she recommended taking a hermeneutics class, and I'm wondering, are there any recommendations for this by you all or even her? And so we actually reached out to Monique, and she said that a great resource for hermeneutics classes is on the website biblicaltraining.org. So that is her recommendation. As far as hermeneutics classes, I just on the thought of hermeneutics, the first thing that came to my mind was if you don't have time to do classes, that just as you study the Bible, just some important tools that help with hermeneutics, which is just how to study the scriptures. How do we do it? We read it, and then how do we study it? How do we unpack what it's saying? So I think just having a good Bible commentary that you have in your home that you can reference when you are reading the scriptures and get stumped on the meaning, which will happen, I think, quite often because we are in 21st century America. And of course, the Bible spans thousands of years of history in a culture that's completely different from ours. And so there's all kinds of language barrier, it wasn't written in English. There's all kinds of things that can get in the way of us really understanding what the scriptures are teaching. So, one Bible commentary that I use a lot is the New Bible Commentary, the 21st Century Edition, and it's edited by several people, but it's published by InterVarsity Press, and it's just called the New Bible Commentary. I use this a lot. My husband and I use it, and actually, apparently we've used it so much, the cover's coming off, so that's a little embarrassing. But also, one Bible commentary that I really like and I use especially to help with the cultural context of things going on is the Bible Background Commentary. This is the New Testament one. It's by Craig Keener. And this is a great one it doesn't unpack a specific verse, but it's just constantly teaching you, like, this is what was going on. This is the culture context of what was going on. And then the last thing I'll recommend, Sarah, and then I'll pass it to you, but the best book that I've read about reading the Bible is a book called Playing with Fire by Walt Russell. And he was a professor of mine and my husband at Biola long ago, and Talbot, the seminary. And it is just a fantastic book on helping you understand how to study the scriptures. It's called Playing with Fire by Walt Russell. And then another book we'll recommend, which actually Elisa Childers and Monique suggested, is How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. And what's the author of that one? I didn't write that down.
Stewart and Fee.
Okay. So How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth is another book, again, that just helps you to understand how to study the scriptures. Okay, Sarah, did you have any you wanted to throw out?
Yeah, I could throw a couple more. What's his name? Glenn Powell wrote a book called Saving the Bible from Ourselves. So I was going to say that one too, the How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. I found that one super helpful. And then Saving the Bible from Ourselves is a really good one. Don't you love that title?
I was just going to say, I love that title.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. So I think you did a great job answering that one. Well done, Erin.
Okay, so the second part of the question is that it sounds like a mom with some young kids. And they're fairly new believers, too, and they didn't grow up in a Christian home. So they're asking us, Sarah, she's saying, we know that we have, a high influence over our kids, and that they're raising their kids, to have a relationship with Jesus. But she said, I just have a concern over what happens when what we believe interacting with our culture conflicts and what the grandparents are doing and saying. So when you have, basically when we're Christians and we have, non-Christian family members, and how we interact with that when there's conflicts on beliefs and things like that. She said, obviously we want our children to have a great relationship with their grandparents, but not at the expense of their relationship with God. I hope that makes sense. Just looking for advice or thoughts on this with a little more parenting experience. So you want to start with that one? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of my thoughts is that the way you establish your family and pursue the Lord and learn together as a married couple, and then alongside with your kids is so influential in dealing with opposition that's coming from family members. I mean, your kids will know where you stand, and so there's the first thought that I had about that. But secondly, my grandmother on my dad's side was a cultural Christian, but it didn't really influence all of her life. And And of course, with my parents, it influenced their life a lot. And I remember I adored this grandmother, but I would go stay with her in the summers for a couple weeks at a time. And she just disagreed with my parents on how they were raising me at times, you know. Like, I remember specifically one time calling my parents to see if I could go see a movie with my cousin, and it was a movie my parents weren't comfortable with me seeing, and so they said no, and my grandmother started talking badly about them to my uncle who was right there. And it affected my relationship with my grandmother. I just felt, I mean, if I've got to choose sides, I'm choosing my parents' side. You know, I'm a little kid. I wasn't a teenager at the time. It might have been different if I was a teenager. But you know, I think one thing is maybe, and I don't know what this listener, what kind of relationship you have with your parents, but I think it's worth sitting down and saying, here's our desire. We obviously disagree on some things, but I just want you to know, I don't want to, I want to just kind of tell you that don't put a wedge between yourself and my kids by disagreeing with me on things that maybe aren't that big of a deal. You know, like, don't put a wedge unnecessarily. Like, sure, if we're doing something that's harmful, like, confront us about it, but don't unnecessarily put a wedge. And I think just having an honest conversation with them and saying, I get that we disagree on a few things, but if we can be on the same page with the kids, it's going to develop a deeper relationship for you with them. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think, Erin?
Yeah, I think, well, her kids are young, so I think I would go into it assuming that your parents, the grandparents, are going to want to support you as a parent and aren't. I guess I wouldn't assume the wedge is going to be there
That's
until
true.
you start seeing things.
I
But
guess
then
that's what I was meaning too. Like, not
yeah.
if something does come up and you're like, don't.
Yes, and I think, and that's what I think you're totally right. Like, just to have an open conversation about it. And then I think, you know, as your kids get older and older, you can just, I think, talking to our kids, narrating to our kids, just being open about, oh yeah, grandma and grandpa, they don't follow Jesus. We do follow Jesus. So when you follow Jesus, you know, your life should look different. But we still love grandma and grandpa. We respect grandma and grandpa. And, you know, if there's conflicts, then we'll address it. But, you know, and so to just try to nurture the relationship, but always just with our kids, we're just always having these conversations. It's okay to have just open conversations with your kids about, you know, all these other people around us are not followers of Jesus, and that's okay. But we live differently, and hopefully it wouldn't get to the point. But I know, I mean, I have friends who have had to limit time with grandma and grandpa and actually set up really strict boundaries because grandma and grandpa don't have any boundaries on screens, for example, when the kids go to grandma and grandpa's house. And so now the parents can't even trust, you know, their own parents with their kids because of what screen stuff they've been exposed to. So I'm aware. I haven't personally had to deal with that situation, but I have lots of friends that have. And I mean, that's just so heartbreaking. But I think, yeah, as your kids get older, just to keep nurturing conversations with your kids and with your parents when you need to, of this is how we're going to do it with our kids, and just pray that your parents would respect that.
And another thing is, I grew up every night we prayed for our family members who were not believers.
Yeah.
I mean, I just,
Yeah.
it was every night. And we also, my mom is a cancer nurse, and so my grandmother, the one that rolled her eyes at my parents sometimes, she was a big time smoker. And I remember one time because my mom would tell me all these stories, because she's a cancer nurse. And I remember one time my grandmother Roberta, who was a Southern belle, she said, "Sarah, what would you like for Christmas?" And I said, "For you to stop smoking." And she's like, "Another reason they're on the naughty list." It was hilarious. I look back and I'm
Oh,
like, wow, really?
and yeah, our kids say things we hope they don't,
Yeah.
but they do. But I love that. That's a good way to end this
Yeah.
one of that
Hmm.
we teach our kids to pray
Hmm.
for that. That's a part of our family's culture too,
Yeah.
that we're praying for our family members that aren't believers.
That's
Okay,
right.
can we fit in one more
Hmm.
question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Sarah, how do you make time to read like you do? I know you gals have busy lives.
That's
So,
from Emma, a listener, Emma.
yeah. So, Sarah, how do
Yeah.
you make time to read?
Well, um, I kind of think of it in chunks. I've come to realize that I'll never have hours and hours or days and days to just read, but those vacation days that I do have, I soak them up. But there's a couple things like finding the chunks of time to read even a chunk of something. And I have books in different rooms, always carry a book in my purse. And then the other thing, okay, here's one thing I think you guys will all resonate with. Okay, kids go to bed or they're, doing whatever they're doing at night. And I sit down and my instinct is to want to like mindlessly do, be entertained
Mhm.
somehow, like scroll through Facebook. Oh, I
Mhm.
haven't checked Instagram. Oh, maybe I should check email. And then I'm like, and I check email. I'm like, I bet something new has happened on Facebook. And so what I've realized is if I can put my phone down for those first 5 minutes and just discipline myself to read the book for 5 minutes, I'm done. I'm good. I'm like totally into the book. I'm sailing. One thing that helps me is just to have some quiet music going on because it kind of, I don't know, something about noise. Maybe it's because I'm extrovert. I don't know. So
Mhm.
having the music going and then saying, I don't need to, nothing new has happened in the world that needs my attention. I'm putting my phone down. I'm putting it on silent and
Mhm.
I'm timing myself because I literally do. I time myself for the first 5 minutes. I feel so antsy. I want to do anything but sit there and read. But if I
Hmm.
can make it through the first 5 minutes, I'm golden. I'm good to go for hours. How about you?
Yeah, that I've never put my finger on that like you have just now, but that is so true. It's like those first few minutes when you have some time, it's easy to just grab your phone, but if you grab a book, first of all, I never regret it if I
Yes.
grab the book. If I grab the phone, I always regret it. Because something about that just feels so wasted.
I
But
know.
so yeah, I think just practically, it's just that I have the books because I'm always in several books at the same time. I have them around. My Bible and one of the books I'm reading is always right there by the couch, and that's where I read in the morning. And then I always have a book in my purse, which is why I carry a big purse.
Right.
And I typically will have a book in the car. I have books by my bed, of course. So, first of all, just actually physically having them around, don't you think, Sarah?
Yeah.
It's like, because then when I pull up to pick up my kid from soccer or art class or whatever, and they're not ready,
Hmm.
instead of like, while even that 5 minutes while I'm waiting for them to get in the car,
Hmm.
or when it's in the car, even when I'm pumping gas, and I drive a big Suburban, so it takes a while to fill up. I mean, it's a good 5 minutes that I'm sitting there. And so having the book in my car is helpful just to even pick it up. And then, having it just around is helpful. And then, of course, prioritizing it. Part of
Hmm.
it is just what is important to you, you will do.
Hmm.
So, if you really do want to become a reader, which I did really want to become a reader, many years ago, I just had to decide not to do other things. And then I found, the 15 minutes, the 20 minutes, the 30 minutes really did add up.
Mm-hmm.
And I started reading and finishing books.
Yeah.
So that made a big difference. And too, I love audiobooks. So I listen to books when I'm doing laundry, when I'm mowing the lawn, when I'm washing dishes. When I go on walks, well, usually when I go on walks, I listen to podcasts. But like this morning on my walk, I was listening to C.S. Lewis. And so I do a mixture of having the physical books and then listening to audiobooks. And it's just all of that adds up. And what it adds up to is, a month goes by and I've actually read several books.
Yeah.
And it's great, and it really is not having these big moments of our lives to read. It's just making it a priority in the small moments that make the difference.
That is so true. And then I wanted to add one more thing before we move on, but
Yeah.
I think also being okay with working through some hard things slowly. So what I mean by that is, for example, that a couple years ago, I wanted to read all 3 of Dante's comedy, and starting with Inferno, going through Purgatory, all the way to Paradiso, and so I just said, what if I just read a canto a day? That's what it's basically a chapter. It's called a canto. It took me a whole year, and that's okay. Like, who cares? Like, I read a canto a day. It took me like 10-ish minutes to read, or like right now, I'm working through Alistair McGrath's Christian theology, and I know that it will take me at least a year, but that's fine. Like, I'm just trying to learn. And so if I need to do it, and I actually have set that one aside till summer for my own sanity, because I just feel like I really keep feeling guilty about not making that. And that 20-minute time to read the next section. And that's all I'm trying to do is I was trying to do 20 minutes a day to read a section. But I realized that I need to set it aside, but I'm going to pick it back up in the summer. So, it's not like I'm giving up on it, but there's like a pacing yourself with some of the harder things.
Yeah, which I think actually relates back to our question about education and our alma maters, and how I think really shifting in our mindset of looking at books at like a box to check off, and changing our mindset to think about books as a way to learn. And so this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon, and so then we are patient with ourselves, because I'm not a fast reader. I've gotten better, the more that I read over the years. I'm a faster reader because I'm, like you said, you start to understand things better, and you go back to books that you didn't understand before. And like for me, that was Till We Have Faces with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
The first time I'm just like, what is this talking about? I have no idea. So you notice growth like that, but it's because it's this marathon of like, I want to be a learner. I want to be a reader, but this is a jog. It's not a sprint. And so it's okay to take things slow, and some books that are hard, you just have to take slow. But I mean, and this is the nice thing of being out of school. There's no deadline. There's no paper that's due. We can just read and enjoy it and take it at our own pace, and not have to stay up with somebody else. And that for me has what is brought in the joy of learning, is because I can go at my own pace, and I don't have to compare myself, with anybody else. And I can just enjoy it. So that was a great question. So let's end this Q&A. We have more questions, so we're going to do another Q&A, but this one we will end with the topic of books. What's your recent book stack? And this was from Missy. So Sarah, what's in your book stack at the moment?
Okay. Hi, Missy. I know why you're asking that. You have your own book stack, and I'd love to see what you're reading now, because you always have an interesting stack. Missy's very active on Facebook, so Missy, once you hear this, take a picture of your book stack. But okay, my book stack right now. So we have some amazing upcoming guests. And so Erin and I like to read their books and find out more about them so that we feel like we know them once we get them on the podcast. And then it's kind of creepy because they don't know us at all. And we're like, so how are your children? I'm just kidding. We try not to be creepy, but, but anyway, so all that to say, I'm going to steal yours, Erin, because we're reading the same thing right now. The Raising Secure Daughters and Confident Sons by Glenn Stanton, who we're going to have on, we're actually interviewing him this week, but the episode will air eventually, so be looking for that. But we're going to talk to him about gender and all that. And
his book is so good.
It's so good. And okay, and then I'm reading Allie Beth Stuckey's book, You Are Not Enough, and That's Okay. And the reason why I'm almost done with that one, the reason why I read that one is when we were talking to Elisa Childers, and we said, you know, so many people are drawn to the Jen Hatmakers and the Glennon Doyles because they're vulnerable, they're funny, they're relatable. But unfortunately, there's just so many lies that they're proclaiming as truth. And so we had asked her what, you know, people who are drawn to that, you know, just that relatability and the authenticity, is there a book that we could recommend? And she said Allie Beth Stuckey's, and it is so good, you guys. I mean, she just lays out truth so winsomely, and she has funny stories. She's a newer mom, I think she has a 2-year-old maybe, and so she has wonderful stories and very relatable. So I'm enjoying that one. How about you, Erin?
Yeah, so I'm reading the Secure Daughters, Confident Sons too, and I'm loving it. And I'm also reading someone we're going to have on the podcast, Christopher Yuan, and his book,
Out of a Far Country, right?
Out of a Far Country. It's sitting here on the table, but I had to look at it.
I think I just got mine today, so I haven't started that one.
Okay, good. It's really good. It's and his mom and him they switch off writing the chapters, so it's just beautiful. So I'm loving that. I'm reading The Weight of Glory by C.S. Lewis, and I've been reading it actually since let's see, I guess December maybe, but anyway, so I'm my second way through it, but I've been reading it slow and writing lots of notes, and I love reading it slow because I am getting so much out of it. I just love it.
I love that
and
one.
it's so thick, you know. And another book I'm reading slowly this year is Letters to a Diminished Church by Dorothy Sayers.
Yeah.
So I'm reading that one slow, and I've with most of the letters, so it's the chapters are just each one's a letter. Instead of moving on to the next one, I'm trying to read the letter twice. Because the first time, I don't know, it's rich and it has a lot. So it's same with Lewis. It's like, it's so deep that I get more out of it if I slow down and then actually read it again. Because I realize I noticed stuff that I didn't notice the first time. And two, it's like the journaling or writing, it helps me remember some of this stuff too. So,
Okay,
so
wait,
that's what I'm reading.
I have
right
to add
now.
one more that I'm reading. To the kids, I'm reading 1984. And
Oh, yeah.
and I've never read it before. And Abigail, my oldest, was like, hey, we should read this. I've been wanting to read it. So I decided, well, let's read it out loud. Okay, just FYI, it is not PG. And I'll come to a part. I'm able to explain it to my kids as like they were even trying to control, you know, who they loved and how they even viewed sex. You know, they were trying, but there are some, I'll get to a part and be like, yada, yada, yada. You know, Elaine on Seinfeld, how she'd be like, yada, yada, yada. But I'm trying to like explain it in an age appropriate way, but I'm skipping some sections. But that is a really interesting book. I'm glad we're reading that. But
So 1984 by George Orwell.
Yeah.
You're talking about.
yeah. Anyway, well, okay, we got to do this again because we didn't even get to hardly any of our questions yet. But I'm so glad that we could do this today. And thank you guys for listening and for engaging with us and building this community. And we just really appreciate you. And it's been fun to get to know some of you on Facebook, and we just look forward to more of getting to know you. All right, we'll see you next time.